This podcast is part of the Some Buddies Network. You're never alone when you've got some buddies.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons, or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as Mr. Most Days Off, and today, I sure hope you like your beer cold, your TV loud, and your podcast amateur. But of course, I won't be going at this alone. In fact, not only do we have your co-host with the most, but we have a very special guest joining us today. First and foremost, let's get to your co-host with the most, Richie the Whiz Kid. How you doing today, Rich?
I'm excited to talk about this episode, man. This is always a very fun one with a lot of cool stuff going on. So, you know me, I'm not going to waste any time. Let me throw it back to you, the man, the myth, the atomic discombobulator himself. It is Miles.
That's like, it gotta be worth at least $50, right?
That's in like $1997 or $98.
Well, joining us today, it's kind of a broken record at this point, but just another great person that came into my life through Dallas Comedy House. She is a improvisational comedian local here in Dallas. Welcome to the show, Jamie Zeske.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, Jamie. How are you today?
I'm stoked. I'm figuring out podcasts for the first time, and I'm just really excited to be here. Doing good. Excited about this episode. Excited about the show.
That's great. We're very excited to have you. And we always start out when we have guests. My favorite question to ask is, well, first of all, Jamie, feel free to tell everybody a little bit about yourself. But really what I want to know is about your earliest connection with The Simpsons.
Okay, so this is pretty good because I'm about to be 36, so The Simpsons I was not allowed to watch initially. My parents made me, if I were to watch an episode, I would have to write a little report on the moral or the social value of the episode.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
So this is sort of like in that era of panic of all the Bartman shirts were not allowed at school. I was attending a Catholic school, my parents might watch this or Beavis and Butthead. They kind of gave into the moral panic that they heard about without actually watching the show. Now my parents are both educators. Now my dad shows...
Well, that makes sense with the book report assignments for every
Yes.
episode you had to watch.
It very much makes sense. But now it's come around to the point that my dad shows the Treehouse episode where they do the spoof of The Raven.
Yes.
To introduce Edgar Allan Poe to his students. So, hang in there. Things might turn around for you. But yeah, initially my parents would be like, oh, they just saw this rude kid and didn't want me to copy him, which is kind of relevant to the episode we'll be discussing today. But yeah, I had to write.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had to write little essays every time I wanted to watch it. And eventually I just found out it was easier to go to a friend's house and watch it. But then eventually they came around and watched it with me and saw the merit to it. So that's kind of where I come to from The Simpsons age-wise. So I sort of discovered it in the golden era, and have been watching it periodically ever since. I'm kind of, I still kind of like a lot of the episodes, but this is definitely the episodes I most relate to, I should say.
I think it's hilarious that your parents punished you with essentially what we choose to punish ourselves with in the form of a podcast.
Yeah. The irony is not lost on me.
Do you still have those notes by any chance?
Not about those episodes, but I do have notes about that I took today, probably because of that experience and because of who my parents are, yeah.
Yeah, if we could have borrowed those book reports, we could have, you could have really saved us some time in our early episode reviews.
Oh, gosh, I should have thought about that.
Jamie, I also want to know, do you happen to remember the first episode that you clearly remember watching?
The one that I really remembered that I had to do the first report on was I believe it's a Thanksgiving episode where Lisa makes a diorama and Bart throws it in the fire.
Yeah.
Bart vs. Thanksgiving. I think that was season 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. Very cool.
I think that was like the first one I had to write a report about. Yeah.
Again, the irony of this is just going to melt my brain for the duration of our conversation. So if I ever break out in the giggles, just understand I'm still laughing at that. You already said that this episode's special to you. Another thing I always like to ask our guests is when I reach out to everybody to be on the show, I always ask which episodes are closest to you of this season that you'd like to be a part of, and why is it that you chose this episode to discuss?
Well, it was a toss-up, as we said, in communication between this and Grade School Confidential, because that's just a great episode, has like some of my favorite lines in it. But this episode, I'm very drawn to because, well, I'm a queer individual for one thing. So this episode was right, kind of perfect in my, because I was in like 8th grade when I watched this episode, and like, I had a secret boyfriend that my friends knew about, and like my parents and I had many of those, whoever you're going to be, we're going to love you and be okay kind of conversations. Like I hadn't come out to them yet, but they had sort of like told me that it would be okay whenever I was ready to.
Sure.
And culturally, this was like kind of pre Ellen DeGeneres coming out on her show. So it was like, kind of rare to see a queer character. And I also love John Waters right about this time, was like right when I was getting into him. So it's sort of like the perfect avalanche of the show that I loved, like featuring a queer character who was voiced by this director I was getting really into. And it's just like, in its time and even today, just like a really well done episode, a very delicate balancing act that they pull off like very well. And it's very funny and very heartwarming to me, so that was why I was interested.
Very cool. You spoke about the not really having like the gay representation and whatnot in television. This was actually, according to the commentary track, which I'll say did feature Bill Oakley, Josh Weinstein, Mike Anderson, Ron Haig, Steve Thompson, and guest John Waters, which I was so happy to be able, because I'm also a fan of John Waters. I'll talk more about that later, but I brought all that up to say that at this time, the only gay character in a major like primetime television show was actually just a guest spot on an episode of 30 something. So this was pre Will and Grace.
Wow.
This was pre, obviously like Queer Eye, and there it was a completely different time. Both in gay rights and the acceptance of gay culture in America. It's a kind of a weird, almost, what's it called? Time capsule in some ways. But then at the same time, I think that the message, I mean, when you look at what we have going on in 2019, like, yeah, equal rights have come a long way in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean that there's not a long way to go. And you get cases of people that are extremely homophobic, and you get public cases of that. And this episode still, even being now 20 years old, or 20 something years old, I think still has a really important message to it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've talked to lots of people my age that are heterosexual that said that this episode kind of opened their eyes a little bit as well.
I would be in that camp 100%. Yeah. Like, I didn't really have gay friends, or honestly, I probably did, but none that were out. You know what I mean? Like, just of the acceptance of the time. But yeah, I didn't know gay people personally in my life at that time. So watching this episode was kind of an interesting, like, oh, hey, I mean, just to give an example, my dad was like, there's a line coming up in this episode that's almost like, I swear, like, it comes directly from my father, because there is this time where he was talking about a gay person in front of, like, it was like a family event, and at first he said he basically referred to this person as a fag, and then realized his faux pas, and then changed it very quickly to queer, and was so proud of himself because he thought he made like the cultural save. So he's like, that faggy guy, I mean that queer, I meant queer. And like, like the look in his like face, like you could tell he thought he made the save, and it was just one of those like that was kind of my being raised. So like this was definitely as a straight person a eye-opening experience watching this being addressed on a cartoon show.
Well, I mean, you don't get that kind of stuff from, like you said, from any television show. So of course, leave it to the Simpsons to to go about this in a lighthearted way. And I was gonna say like props to them for the way that they handled it, for making Homer just be like so far out of his mind that they can make it funny. Like I was gonna say that, but then you had to tell that story, Miles, where it's like, oh no, people were just that way and still are sometimes. So never mind.
And still very much are, unfortunately, this time. Well, how about we go ahead and dive into the episode? We are talking about We are talking about Homer's phobia. They added Roy last week. They could add Homer in this week. It's fine. They're talking about Homer's Phobia, originally aired on February 16th, 1997. The idea for this script came from a couple of episode ideas. We've talked about it many times, where the Simpsons writers always do a writing retreat at the beginning of every season to kind of get the season in order and make sure everybody's got assignments and all that good stuff. And one script was floating around was just about camp culture in general. Just the idea of all of the the antique store or whatever it is that John Waters' character runs in this. Yeah, they're cockamamie's. Thank you. Cockamamie's is very, very buried in like the camp culture. So that was one of the scripts. The other script really didn't have much going on inside of it other than a title, which was simply Bart the Homo. They took these two ideas and married them, and then it was, I believe, Bill Oakley or Josh Weinstein, possibly both, were just huge John Waters fans. So they reached out and asked John Waters to play a character that was based on him but not him, which he admitted confused him and made him question the decision. But ultimately, he's quoted on the commentary as saying, if it's good enough for Elizabeth Taylor. The episode actually opens up with Bart and some pretty typical Bart antics. Bart's a lot more intelligent than he often comes off, and in this case, he is screwing over all the neighbor kids on a makeshift lottery using random sports balls and I think a shoe numbered in a dryer to make like the spinning tumbler thing. Everything goes terrible almost immediately when the shoe blocks up the dryer, and what I love is this is like way over the top, but like somehow the dryer becomes disconnected from the gas line and flames are just like engulfing the basement yet not catching anything on fire.
Every kid's worst nightmare. Have you ever seen Home Alone?
No refunds. Read the back of your tickets.
Always the savvy businessman.
And just like many other episodes, one of Bart vs. Australia immediately comes to mind, but it's one of Bart's antics that put the Simpsons in financial troubles that they have to address. In this case, they get a bill from the gas company for $900, which makes Homer go for the retirement fund, which happens to be a 5-gallon water bucket full of pennies.
Oh man, can you imagine taking that to Coinstar?
I'd also like to point out they kind of never return to the money aspect. They just meet John and the episode goes on. Like they never solve that $900 problem.
They drop their pennies to China and they're like, I guess we tried. I do like that when he drops the bucket in the front yard, it just makes a huge deep hole and Homer's like, China, little help? Marge is a little bit distraught, but she realizes the only option is to sell Grandma's Civil War doll. And that's what brings us to Cockamamie's, which is an antique store in the mall. I do like the interaction we see with Skinner right off the bat. He's at the counter.
Part.
Is it really?
It's kind of fun and kooky. Well, you just talked yourself out of a sale, little misty.
I love that he's looking for non-partisan campaign buttons. Like something that says, like, may the best man win.
Let's have a good, clean election, that sort of thing.
I mean, I like his vision for the world of politics. It's just never been realistic.
Jamie, would you consider yourself into camp culture?
Yeah.
Right on. I think to some extent everybody is in some ways, just in the sense that we all have like some nostalgia for some shit that's pretty crappy if you really think about it. Like if you look back on some of those like old cartoon shows and old even live action shows we watched as kids in the 80s, early 90s, it's like when you look back you're like, oh man, I was watching 30-minute commercials like daily, like, and I was
absolutely. And I think something that's interesting about both this episode and like the camp culture based on nostalgia, like I kind of don't think you can judge something outside of the era in which it was produced.
Sure.
So it's kind of interesting to look at this episode with its like 20-year-old values. That's also talking about like Jackie O's TV guide and like all of these kitsch items from yesteryear. And like, yeah, that has an inherent camp value that I appreciate. I also just love when something is produced and you're like, what was the thinking behind this? Like the kind of, how did this get made? Like, why does this little trinket of pop culture exist? So I'm definitely fascinated by that. But I definitely also like sincerity. So I like camp and sincerity, I think.
That's fair. I do get a kick out of places like this, doors like this, just in the sense, like you said, you got to look at some things and just be like, wow, at like what group of people in combination of like chemical influencers got together to make this a product ever.
I would totally want to go to this store for what it's worth. I would probably just peruse through everything and not actually buy anything, but I would absolutely love to walk around and see everything in there, including the aforementioned atomic discombobulator.
Though I don't know, I probably would have bought those pogo stilts.
Poor Homer.
I like that though. There really was something for everybody. Like Bart had the pogo stilts, and Lisa was really into the clink clink you're dead robot. I think our Homer was the only one that was kind of like, I don't understand. Why is this stuff for sale? I do like the joke too when Lisa's actually commenting, an actual robot from the movie Clink Clink You're Dead. Oh, think of how awful it must have been for the poor midget inside.
Ah, boo-hoo. That's what they get paid for.
But when they walk away, the door pops open and there's actually a tiny little skeleton in there. Oh, dark but fun humor. Jamie mentioned they have a reference to Jackie O, and Marge is actually really into the TV guide that was owned by Jackie O. This is when we actually are introduced to the character John, whose first line is, oh, you should see the crossword puzzle. She thought that Mindy lived with Mark.
Give her a break. Her husband was killed.
I love his passionate defense of Jackie O.
For sure.
Well, the TV guide, it said something like Laverne and Shirley too daring for TV or something on the cover of the TV guide.
A time capsule within a time capsule.
Real quick, just going back to the commentary, I'll be straightforward on this. There wasn't a ton of information just because it was really just listening to a conversation amongst a group of people who clearly very much both respect and admire each other. Because John Waters was actually flown in from Baltimore to LA to do the commentary. It was actually the same when he went to record the episode. Like I already said, that he had considered it and literally said he agreed to do it because Elizabeth Taylor had done it. But one thing that he was very frustrated about vocally, not in like a mean way, in a very John Waters way, actually, it was really funny, but he was frustrated because the pencil mustache that's drawn on the Simpsons character is very wavy, and he is known distinctly for having a very fine point, straight line mustache going across, but the animators had to explain to him that it just didn't look like, it looked like they misdrew his lip if they drew it more true to life. So they had to give it the little wave. Otherwise it just wouldn't work out. But if you've ever wondered why they drew John Waters into the show, but they changed his mustache, it was actually for practical reasons.
It would look like he had two mouths almost if they did the straight line. That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense that John Waters' mustache would be too cartoonish for a cartoon. And this is coming with so much love. John Waters, call me if you're hearing this. I'm just saying.
So, on that note, I've actually talked a little bit about the fact I'm a huge fan of John Waters the person. I don't so much enjoy his movies, if I'm being real honest. I really enjoy hearing him talk. I've heard of a couple of his one-man shows where he's just telling stories about his life and his career making films. And I think he's a fascinating human, even though I don't think his particular brand of art is really for me, which I think is kind of interesting. It sounds to me like you're a big fan of both the individual and the art. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, well totally. Yeah, I agree that even if his stuff isn't for you, his personality, his storytelling, his like entrepreneurial hustle, like I think anybody can get something out of it if you like listen to his kind of the stuff he's doing now, his book tours and stuff like that. I think he's a very fascinating person. But yeah, like his movies have always spoke to me. I'm a big fan of the unhinged, like stylistic, trashy grossness. It's sort of like just very cathartic to see people behaving very disgustingly and still be like objects of love. And like, you know, like he just looks at his subject with such affection, even when they're doing such disgraceful things, that you just like kind of get on board with this point of view for me. And, you know, obviously coming from a queer perspective, like that, some of that disgust is like magnified to like how the world can treat queer people. But I also think all of his movies are really fun. They're just like, whether it's like a musical or like a like sex disease movie, like he just always sort of nails it. Like,
again, I think he's a fascinating artist, and I will say I do enjoy the movie Serial Mom pretty well. Out of all of the ones that I know of him.
Did you notice when the character's first introduced that there is a pink flamingo on the wall behind him?
oh yeah,
That seems like an Easter egg.
Thank you, Simpson's guidebook.
Very cool. Very cool. So John immediately seems to have a little bit of a connection with Marge. They get to talking about Marge's hair, actually, before they start talking about that old rare figurine that Marge is there to sell. Unfortunately, though, John has a very good eye for antiques, and he almost immediately identifies it as a Johnny Red bottle from the early 1970s, one of the J&R whiskey liquor lads. 2 books of green stamps, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh no. It's a very, very old figurine.
No, it's a liquor bottle. And he actually untwists the cap of the soldier and pours whatever was inside, it seems whiskey, into very old whiskey into his coffee.
That'll make your bull run.
Marge, well, I guess it'll make a monument to Grandma's secret drinking problem.
I like how Lisa's like, please don't construe our ownership of this as an endorsement of slavery. Because it's a Confederate soldier.
That's really funny and also very Lisa, just to be that socially conscious at that time. Please don't think worse of us. Again, though, the one person in the store that just doesn't really seem to be having a good time is Homer. And it's mostly because he's perplexed by the prices. I mean, the Rex Mars Atomic Discombobulator for $50? No kid is worth that.
Don't you just love the graphics on the box?
And this is where they kind of get into the camp culture of everyone. John even straight up says, it's camp. The tragically ludicrous. The ludicrously tragic.
Oh, yeah. Like when a clown dies.
Well, sort of, but I mean, more like inflatable furniture or Last Supper TV trays or even this bowling shirts, which this is another fun little, this is a Simpsons reference, of course, with the Pen Pals. Can you believe somebody gave this to Goodwill?
And the shirt says Homer on it, by the way.
Right, it's clearly Homer's Pen Pal shirt.
And this is kind of where Homer turns around and like is into John now, right? He's like, oh, your crap could be worth money. He's like, interested. Yeah,
and again, I don't think there was any... It was more so a misunderstanding on Homer's part at this point, because to be clear, I don't really think that Homer has an emotional reaction to John at this point. He obviously will in the first act and then a complete flip in the second. But for right now, he's just more, like I said, perplexed at the idea that people would be even into that type of thing. And then, like you said, as soon as he's like, wait, my goods could be exchanged for money that I could exchange for services?
Explain how.
So they basically invite John over
For the snacking hour.
And actually, Homer practically insists for the snacking hour. And again, as soon as John arrives, it's just immediately him just referencing how vanilla and predictable the Simpsons are in so many ways. And I particularly like the part where he's like, oh, the color scheme, the rabbit ears, the 2.3 children. I just mean, where's the high C? And on cue, Lisa's like, I've got high C and fluffernutters.
Oh, and pearls on a little girl. It's a fairy tale.
To be fair, that is ridiculous. She's 8.
Are fluffernutters like a cookie?
I think so. I've heard that term before. I want to say fluffernutter is peanut butter and marshmallow.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that for certain. Honestly, I love peanut butter based things, and I'm good with like s'mores or other marshmallow treats, but marshmallow and peanut butter to me are not a great combination. I don't know why.
There's a consistency issue outside of taste, I think.
I think that might be it, yeah. I definitely say worth giving it a go. Mm-hmm. Much like the corn curtains, if you ever see them at like a swap meet or something, because, I mean, didn't you just die when you found these?
Not really.
They just had corn on them. So, according to IMDb, I don't honestly even know if I believe this, and it wasn't referenced on the commentary, which admittedly makes me a little bit suspect, but they referenced that John has these same curtains in his bathroom. And according to IMDb, this is a joke on the Simpsons writer's part, referencing the fact that corn doesn't really digest easily. Therefore, it would still be recognizable in that state in both the kitchen and the bathroom.
Oh.
I get no other... I have not found any other source referencing where that fact came from. I think it's funny. I don't know if it's actually true.
I mean, we don't really need to get into that shit, do we?
I see what you did there. This is, again, I mentioned earlier, Marge and John seem to have a pretty quick connection. Like, they've become pretty fast friends right off the bat. And there's, like, kind of a little playful hit between John and Marge. And immediately in the background, you see Bart was watching this. So he just walks up and smacks Homer as hard as he can, causing Homer to start choking him. And then Bart, under the, strength of Homer's hands, being like, Dad, company!
Oh, I'll just be another minute, John. Have a seat.
Goes right back to it.
I like that they're already showing the influence between John and Bart. Like, I mean, Bart's literally imitating him instantaneously, and if Homer's paying attention, it's just Bart's just emulating somebody that seems like a pretty cool person, so...
Yeah, that's exactly the point I was about to make. I love that gag about company. Oh, hold on just a moment, John. But then, yeah, like Bart's imitating John because he's like fun and like plays with toys as an adult and stuff. Like, so it's very funny that Homer takes it in this other direction.
Totally.
Because when you're a kid, you just do like what cool adults do.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. It's like any other adult that isn't your parent that is giving you even the slightest bit of attention, you're going to kind of like just at least observe, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Totally. John is going through the Simpsons stuff, including Homer's vinyl collection, and basically everything in the house has camp value. John says, even you, Homer, you yourself are worth a bundle. Why, I could wrap a bow around you and slap on a price tag.
Well, what were some of the records were the new Christy Minstrels, Ballads of the Green Berets, and Looney Luau.
What a clash. Interesting.
Yeah.
He probably just bought like a crate of records at a garage sale. I don't know. I don't know how let you get that eclectic of a collection.
I just really want to hear a ballad from a Green Beret. Like,
right? But there's actually a pretty fun moment here where To the audience at this point, you just see Homer and John becoming friends, but you don't really have the perception of what's happening inside Homer's head at this point. And to be fair, Homer is the stupidest character on the show by far, so I guess maybe you could suspect it. But very innocently, Homer dances with John, and it seems like everything is going well. They're, like I said, becoming friends. And Homer even seems to admire John quite a bit. He says the next day at breakfast that he wants to invite John and his wife over for drinks. And that's when Marge realizes that Homer might not be picking up on some things about John's lifestyle.
I don't think he's married, Homer.
Festive?
I do love her pause and delivery on that one. Festive? Homer immediately misinterprets, though, and he finds out John's not married, and is like, oh, he's a swinging bachelor, eh? Well, there's a lot of foxy ladies out there. That's where you get the festive line. And that's when Homer is like, oh yeah, he's clearly happy. It goes on and on and on. Marge is finally like, he prefers the company of men. Homer's, who doesn't? Homer, listen to me carefully. John is a homo.
Okay.
Sexual. And that is actually the moment that takes us to the end of our first act, and it's a very clear case that Homer is very homophobic. He had absolutely no problem with John until the very moment, and it really had to be hammered and driven home that Homer's new friend was in fact gay. And for right now, we're going to go ahead and take a very quick break, but we'll be right back with Act 2 of Homer's Phobia. Greetings, friend. Do you wish to look as happy as me? Well, you've got the power inside you right now, so use it and send $1 to Best Darn Diddly. You can find us on patreon.com or donate to us directly on PayPal at bestdarndiddly@gmail.com. Don't delay. Eternal happiness is just $1 away.
$1 for eternal happiness, and to support one of my favorite podcasts. I'd be happier with $1.
We open up back in the kitchen with Homer having a full-on breakdown. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god! I danced with a gay! Marge, Lisa, promise me you won't tell anyone! Lisa, promise me!
You're being ridiculous.
Am I, Marge? Am I? Think of the property values. Now we can never say only straight people have been in the house.
Can we talk about this line? Because it's great. Because it's a really great example of the most nonsensical objection. It's but it has to be practical. It's I'm hateful because of the property values. Yeah, the property values.
Well, I know when I'm browsing through Zillow, the first column that I go to is former homosexuals that have lived on the property. I mean, they keep really good statistics on that in 2019. I don't know how they did it back in 97 when this aired, but you're right. It's absurd. Data. It's completely absurd, and it's really funny that that's the first thing that Homer's brain goes to. And to the rest of the family's credit, specifically Marge and Lisa as well, I don't know that Bart really chimes in here, but I think they do that purposely because of the idea that, we're going to watch Bart mimic John more than anything. Or not mimic, just grow attached to him. He's a good friend.
Yeah.
They do a good job of keeping Bart out of the scene so that they can go with that storyline where that also pays off at the very end of the episode when Lisa has to talk to Bart about that.
Yeah, also the later joke about hunting being gay wouldn't work if Bart was aware of what was going on. Delicate balancing act this episode.
So Homer is immediately protesting that they're no longer going to hang out with John, but Marge is like, we agreed to go on a drive with him today, and we're going. And immediately we hear the custom car horn from John's convertible, which I do love. It plays Somewhere Over the Rainbow and honking noises, which is, according to IMDb, and potentially you can add or you can speak to this, I don't know personally, but says Somewhere Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz is a symbol of gay pride and diversity.
At that time, sure.
Right on. I was gonna say,
and in the episode, it functions like I think Homer says something right before that. Like I think maybe the homosexual flaming line is right before that because it's something about how he didn't know John was gay, and then he does the over the rainbow horn, which is like, oh, of course he's gay.
Oh, you're so right, and it's one of Dan Castellaneta's like better deliveries of a line when Homer says, "You know me, Marge. I like my beer cold, my TV loud, and my homosexuals flaming."
Well, and he'd also said right before Marge's line right before that he's the kind of person that likes it when somebody just throws it out there and they don't hide that fact.
Oh, yeah. He's not mad at John for being gay. He's mad at him for being a sneak because, he should have introduced himself as, "Hi, I'm gay John."
Yeah, there's nothing about the John character that makes me think he's closeted in any way. So.
Homer refuses to join in on the fun. Yeah, even though from the car you can see John actually shooting at Homer playfully with that discombobulator we mentioned earlier. But Homer refuses to leave. The rest of the family goes and has fun, and Homer is left back at the house just kind of like living in his own paranoia at this point, thinking like, oh my god, my family's gonna catch gay from this new, friend of theirs.
Well, you just had, when they were leaving too, Homer was looking at Bart, and Bart did the, "Oh, Dad, you are the living end."
Yeah.
And that's the first time where you have Homer looking at Bart like, "Oh no."
And that brings me back to something, too, that this isn't like this has never existed with Bart's character to begin with. Even back when we had Carolyn Omine, I know we just talked about her last week, but we had a great conversation with her. Go check it out. Our Cape Fear episode, she was on the show, and if you remember, she even brought up the idea that when Bart was doing, like, the show tunes, like, there's always been that element of, like, it's just really, more than anything, it's showmanship, but, I mean, there's a tendency for Bart to kind of go, I mean, we've seen him do drag, we've seen him wear wigs, we've seen him, he's got that kind of, like, young, artistic mind in the way that his brain works. Yeah, like, so it's not like there's these quote-unquote gay qualities about his son that are just suddenly popping up because John's in his life. Bart just enjoys that type of play, and he's 10 years old, so, whatever, it's fine.
Well, I agree with that, but not only that, but Homer has also shown many effeminate and open-minded little things throughout the series as well. I mean, they both... I think this episode is much more about anxiety than about, like, actual sexuality.
That makes sense. Yeah, Homer's... And I think, Homer's... I'm sorry, your point that Homer has had those kind of more, open-minded moments in the past until it's like directly in his home. He seems like he's fine, and then suddenly in this episode, he's like, "Well, it's too close. It's too close."
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's another thing about Homer. Like, he'll put like food and beer and TV before sex anyway.
Good point.
So like he likes other people being affectionate towards him. And that's why I think it's kind of funny that he's all about John until he realizes that, like, no, that's like a gay 24/7 lifestyle. Whereas Homer's just like kind of id-based, like, give me all the satisfaction now. Like, I don't care what it is. But yeah, I think he sort of gets away from it when he as the episode goes on to show that, like, he thinks Bart being gay would make him a bad father.
Well, and I know we're like multiple seasons ahead, but we're going to have the one season where Homer actually moves in with a gay man and thinks that he is gay for a while too, and like he moves out from Marge. So,
oh yeah,
I like your thought about it being a lot more about anxiety than about the actual issue, because that just makes perfect sense.
Agreed.
Which in that episode, which I watched last night, one of the gay roommates kisses him. Mm-hmm. And he jumps out the window and yells, "I would only end up hurting you." So I think he was enjoying that attention until it became real.
He liked the idea of it, but then, yeah, like you said, then it happened. Sure.
Like he likes the affection, just not like the nitty-gritty biology of it all.
Sure.
Which is fair.
So again, the rest of the family all goes and has a fun day with John. Bart has to sit in the back next to a robotic Santa from Japan where he's known as gift delivery guy or gift delivery robot. Where is it? Annual gift man. That's what it was. And he lives on the moon. I don't know why I bring that up. I can't imagine it would be important later. But
I do feel like this is also a Futurama predecessor, though.
Oh wow, yeah, good point.
Yeah,
I did not put that together, but that's even the character model is pretty close.
Yeah, it really is. Oh my gosh, I feel so stupid now.
John essentially takes the rest of the Simpson family on a tour of all of the gossip of Springfield. He goes and shows off things like where Kent Brockman was caught cheating in the Springfield Marathon, where Lupe Velez bought the toilet she drowned in.
What?
Yeah, that one also had me going, huh?
That's apparently a real thing. Apparently it's a celebrity that died, like committed suicide with their head in the toilet, but I don't know much else about them.
Wow, okay, I missed that reference. I did not even realize that was a reference. That's crazy.
Not to sound dark, but that really takes some follow-through to be able to do that. Holy crap.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, too.
I should have looked up more details, because it is confusing.
There's like 1,000 true crime podcasts out there. I'm sure somebody's covered it.
We love each and every one of them.
Of course. So, they're sitting at a restaurant which suddenly appeared in Springfield for the first time.
Kaboom!
Yeah. Where this place came from, I'm not really certain, but apparently it's always been there. I do love there's this fun little interaction between Waylon Smithers and John, where Waylon approaches the table and sees that he's sitting with the Simpsons, and Smithers is like, "Oh, so this is your sick mother?"
Don't do this to me, Waylon.
I like the idea that those two know each other privately. Like that, I don't know why that made me happy.
I like the idea that Waylon would not just be like sitting at home waiting for Mr. Burns to love him. I like that Waylon would like go out there and date, because it's just a sad life to be in love with Mr. Burns and not have it be reciprocated.
That is true. I think Waylon only gets about 8 hours off a week, but goddamn it, he's gonna live those 8 hours to the fullest.
It's hard to meet somebody in 8 hours a week.
Got to get yourself out there. That's the key.
Yeah.
There's a very quick sequence the next day at the Simpsons' home where we see Bart walks by the couch where Homer's sleeping, and he shoots him with that laser, or that discombobulator. Zap, zap. Hey, Dad, look what I got. Zap, zap. But he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt, and this causes Homer to panic.
Bart, where'd you get that shirt?
I don't know. Came out of the closet? And later, when Homer's talking to Marge about I'm sorry, I just about skipped over the dinner sequence. I shouldn't yet, because at dinner we see that Marge has made their favorite dessert, which is store-bought snack cakes, both kinds. And we see the chocolate rolls and the pink snowballs, and Bart is kind of reaching back and forth in a indecisive manner, and Homer, you can see, is kind of like encouraging the chocolate and being like no whenever he gets to the pink snowballs. So he about loses it when Bart does in fact go with the snowball.
Now he's eating his pillow.
And that brings us to the night with Marge, where, he's actually woken up by Marge because she can hear him eating his pillow, which I love that's his comfort move.
Marge, the boy was wearing a Hawaiian shirt.
So?
There's only two kinds of guys who wear those shirts. Gay guys and big fat party animals. And Bart doesn't look like a big fat party animal to me.
Oh. So if you wore a Hawaiian shirt, it wouldn't be gay?
Right! Thank you!
I love that Homer still identifies as a big fat party animal.
I'd like to add, in real time when this episode came out, I do know at least one self-proclaimed heterosexual who stopped wearing Hawaiian shirts.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me. That's hilarious.
Oh, wow.
I still wear Hawaiian shirts.
Well, as anybody who wants to should.
Oh, and then Homer blames Marge, where he's saying, you have to be so effeminate around the boys.
Yeah, Marge, you could really use your masculine side. The next day, we see Homer walking down the stairs, and he's humming along to the song playing from the living room, which is Shoop Shoop.
He's humming along, which defeats his whole purpose of his argument.
It's in his kiss. That's what I miss? I don't remember. It's not written, but either way, Homer's really happy with it. Like you said, he's singing along with it or humming along with it until the moment that he realizes that Bart is the one playing the song, and he's dancing to it, and he's wearing a wig. So it basically couldn't get any worse at this point in Homer's mind, and he's immediately, you can see he's planning on making some sort of change, and I guess we'll touch back with that shortly. But first, we get a little bit of gossip from John, who's talking to Marge. And Helen Lovejoy? Sure, she looks blonde. But I've heard the cuffs and collar don't match, if you get my drift.
I don't, but I loved hearing it.
I have to say, is Helen Lovejoy ever been blonde? Am I tripping?
No.
Yeah.
I thought it was always like gray colored.
That's also how I interpreted it. Or maybe I guess they were going for dirty blonde. But yeah, when he said that line, I was just like, she's not blonde.
It's weird to think of her that way too.
It really is. I don't know. Honestly, Helen Lovejoy could be very much like one of those blonde, very churchy, a blonde Dallas preacher's wife. That person exists. That person.
And I think if you have gray hair, it's just starting to gray, it's still technically blonde. It's just the gray's more prominent.
I guess so. And also we have to remember that we're talking about animation. So, hair is one of the most difficult things that, they have to draw.
Well, I don't recall them having too many blonde characters at this point in the show. So it could also be the fact that, everybody in town has a yellow hue to them. So it might look weird to have yellow hair kind of at this point in animation.
I'm trying to think of Lurleen Lumpkin has blonde hair. I'm trying to think of other major Simpsons characters that have blonde hair, and there's not a lot of them coming to my mind.
And we'll start getting more here as the seasons go on.
Duffman, I think, is the only one I can think of.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Duffman would be another one. So yeah, I guess blondes just aren't that prevalent, which is why it's interesting. It almost seems like it would have worked better if they said brunette there, but I think we've talked enough about Helen Lovejoy's hair color. It's fine. It's still a funny joke either way. The funny part is Marge's reaction to not understanding John's analogy or whatever metaphor, but I loved hearing it.
She just loves the presentation.
Exactly. Homer comes in angrily and disrupts John and Marge's pleasant conversation, though. I should have known.
Well, good morning, sunshine.
Marge points out that John actually brought cactus candy, which I'm not sure if that's real. It probably is. I've never heard of it. But either way...
What does cactus taste like?
I don't know. I know that,
water?
I've been to Mexican restaurants where they have, cactus breakfast tacos, but I've never ordered them. I have no idea.
Maybe it's just candy in the shape of cactus.
Yeah.
That could be. Either way, though, Homer is not having the candy. Look, John, you seem like a perfectly nice guy and all. Just stay the hell away from my family.
Well, now you don't get any candy. No, that's cruel. Take a teensy piece.
And this is what's so great about John, the character on The Simpsons, is just he's the most good-natured person that's just used to all these shitty comments. So he has the cutest little spin to put on everything.
That's the thing that makes this episode work so well, is that Homer is going really far to one extreme and is even acting almost to the point where I don't think people would actually act this way. But that's the only way they could probably sell the episode. Whereas John is the complete opposite way, where it's they're showing you this really awesome human being, and it's how can you not like this person for who they are, kind of thing. And I think that dynamic is just what makes the episode so funny and works so well.
Yeah.
I think going back in time, we were talking about at the opening of the show, for when I remember watching this as a kid, not having any real gay representation in my life from real life people that I actually knew, I think The Simpsons did a really great job, or they just really, I should say, chose a great ambassador in John Waters, because the way that he just naturally talks, his normal tone of voice, there's definitely a little bit of what you might call an effeminate quality to it. But ultimately, he's just a cool dude. He's not over the top, flaming, for lack of a better word. Like a lot of gay culture was presented, from the straight perspective at that time. So seeing that, like Richie said too, that this guy is just like a fun guy that you would want to hang out with who happens to like dudes, I think was a really strong character. And John Waters just being a cool person really brought a lot to this other version of John that we get to meet in this episode.
Yeah, I think the episode, as we're, I think, about to get into on the field trip between Bart and Homer, like, it very much deals with, like, scales of gayness and stereotypes in an interesting way. But I think what makes John a really good ambassador, as you said, is that he's sort of apolitical about his queerness, and the episode doesn't really present it as, like, this thing that has to be dealt with. He's just, like, a person that lives in the town and does his own thing and, like, sees the good in the other people of Springfield and, like, helps them have a good time, which makes him a really easy character to root for. And, of course, we can see that Homer's kind of in this, like, hissy fit at the opposite extreme. So it's just, like, putting those two against each other, it really, like, sheds a light on how nonsensical intolerance is in a cool, funny way.
Agreed. But also, like, directly leaning into the topic at hand, because in this next scene, we're actually going to lay it out on the table exactly what Homer feels, because John straight up asks, Homer, what have you got against gays?
It's not usual. If there was a law, it'd be against it.
Marge tries to persuade Homer to stop embarrassing himself.
No, I'm not. They're embarrassing me. They're embarrassing America. They turned the Navy into a floating joke. They ruined all our best names, like Bruce and Lance and Julian. Those were the toughest names we had. Now they're just, And
after a little bit of a pause, John fills in the gap. Queer?
Yeah, and that's another thing. I resent you people from using that word. That's our word for making fun of you. We need it. Well, I'm taking back our word, and I'm taking back my son.
Honestly, that little speech there at the end by Homer is one of my favorite moments in the episode, just because I really, really appreciate the idea that he feels that he's entitled to have the word queer to make fun of people who are gay. And I don't know why that's just such a perfect Homer. Like, you can see the just lack of connection. You can see that there's the hamster trying to run up there and, like, the whole wheel is just clogged. But it's still very true to the character. And it's done in a way that's still funny just because of how imbecilic Homer is in this moment.
Well, again, they had to have many talks about this when they were writing the script. I feel like you have to make it absurd on Homer's end, or else you're treading dangerous waters on this episode. So it becomes less funny and a little too serious unless it's absurd.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. It honestly reminds me in some ways of, I don't know, I know Richie isn't much of one. Do you happen to be a Kevin Smith fan, Jamie?
At one point, I very much was.
So, the movie Chasing Amy, are you familiar with that?
Oh, yes.
So that's a movie that got a lot of backlash in some ways from certain parts or, certain gay communities. I'm not sure of I don't have, like, the notes in front of me. I just remember this from the Evening with Kevin Smith that had come out at one point. But my point of all that was just going to say that the problem that some people had with those scripts were some of the very homophobic things that certain characters would say. But most of the most homophobic things that came out were from the character of Brody, who is the stupidest character in the movie by far. And that was Kevin Smith's kind of justification. It's like, I made the guy completely stupid, so when he said things, people would know they were most likely stupid. And I feel like that's what works for Homer's role in this episode, is because we know Homer to be such a buffoon. When he goes on these little, like, kind of tirades that are completely homophobic, they get not a pass, that might be too strong, but for the sake of comedy they do, so that we can move the script forward and find resolution.
I generally agree with that, but for one thing, I always read Brody as being closeted.
Oh.
Also very
not?
interesting.
Oh.
I have not, but it's, you know what? Now that I say that, it's been years since I watched that movie. I could easily see that as being being his problem, where he's dealing with a lot of internal conflict and he's outlandishly speaking out in dumb ways. So yeah, I could see that.
I feel like Ben Affleck says it outright when they're like discussing the threesome at the end.
So now I need to go back and rewatch.
Yeah, this is a different podcast. But yeah, that was the only reason I would disagree, and that like Brody is like very much a troll in that movie. But I agree, you have to have it. You have to include enough homophobia that it's like informative and convincing to a straight audience who doesn't experience homophobia, and like also move past it at the same time.
Sure. But Homer is getting Bart out of that situation, is how he sees is the right move moving forward, because he wants to get his boy back to being as straight and regular as Burt Reynolds. So Homer goes on a good old-fashioned manly road trip where father and son... There's another really awkward... Honestly, it's funny, but it's Homer talking to his brain, and he's like trying to show affection to his son, but then being like, oh God, no, I can't have man-on-man affection. That's gay.
You're onto him. Quick, shake his hand.
What were you going to say, Jamie?
What I really like about the scene, not just queerness, but I think it's a very dad and son like thing to have those like long silent car rides where like, because a lot of dads are like stoic and like don't say very much at a time, and then there's like these pauses where like you can interpret all kinds of things if you wanted to, and then like until the next thing is said, and then it's like, oh yeah, we forgot about the last thing. It was just writing for like spending time with dad in the car, I think.
Stewing silence.
Yes.
Just remember, son, no matter what happens, I'll always love you.
As
a father, a regular father.
Oh my gosh.
So Homer sets up a lawn chair in front of a cigarette billboard featuring two very scantily clad ladies. Bart is confused. What the hell am I supposed to do here?
Nothing. Just sit. I'll be back.
So we see time pass as Bart just stares at a billboard of Laramie Slims, and when Homer gets back 2 hours later and asks how Bart feels, he replies, I kind of want a cigarette.
That's a good start. Let's get you a pack. What's your brand?
Anything slim.
Okay, that didn't work.
Plan backfired.
But to be fair, he sat him in front of a billboard about Slim, so...
Yeah, I don't think he thought that through, that the tobacco company was going to be marketing to sell cigarettes and not sex, though using one to sell the other. That's when Homer gets the idea that they need to go somewhere with real men. You know, people that work hard for a living and have good old regular lives. And that's where we see them go to the steel mill, where Homer introduces... I said that's so weird, whatever. You know what I meant. The anvil, damn it. Homer introduces Bart to a man by the name of Roscoe, a very normal-seeming man in a hard hat, telling him all about how it works there. And they go to show him around, and just then it turns out that it's break time for all of the employees.
Before that, we start having everybody say hello, where they're like, hello!
Oh, yeah, and that's like, Homer realizes at that point, he's like, huh? Has the whole world gone insane?
And then we get a very fun moment between two workers standing behind them. Stand still, there's a spark in your hair.
Get it!
Hot stuff coming through.
The workers in this scene are amazing. The dancing is amazing. Bart's, why did you take me to a gay steel mill? It's amazing.
I don't know. This is a nightmare. You're all sick.
There's actually like a disco ball, laser lights. There's a one shot of a guy dancing in front of a fan. It's just a silhouette.
Oh yeah, he's like voguing with the fan turning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very, very popular shot. I think, like you said, voguing. So it's probably made famous by Madonna, but it's been referenced in a lot of work, including The Simpsons now. But it actually turned into a very club scene. They even had a sign that said it was called the Anvil, which, according to John Waters, is a real gay club. And he was very curious about how, like, if that was just like an accident or if they actually did research and found out that there was a gay club called the Anvil. And it really was, originally it was going to be something entirely different. It was going to be set up, the whole reason it was set up like this in the beginning was they were going to go a completely different way in the third act, where Homer was actually going to challenge these guys to like some various manly competitions to prove to his son that straight men were more manly than gay men, regardless of how physically superior these guys clearly were to Homer. They obviously ended up going a completely different direction. They just said they storyboarded that one out and they just couldn't really make it funny. Like, it just didn't really... It essentially just kind of got to a point where they felt like it was being more actually homophobic than funny at some point. Yeah. So they tried to go with a better resolution to the situation. But however they ended up there, they apparently parodied a very popular real-life gay club of the time, according to John Waters.
Well,
fun stuff.
They work hard and they play hard.
And for now, we're going to go ahead and break hard, because that brings us to the end of our third act. We'll be right back for the conclusion of Homer's Phobia. Hi, I'm Mr. Most Days Off. You might remember me from such podcasts as the 50th Podcast Celebration Show and the Michael Price interview. I brought a friend along today to talk to you about an exciting new product.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Richie the Whiz Kid.
Miles, did you know that most people don't know where to get cool pop culture shirts?
I had no idea.
If you go to popthreads.com, you'll find a great selection of t-shirts, and if you use the discount code Simpsons, you could save 15% on your order. And that's good news for everybody.
That is good news for everybody.
And did you know the shirts are also inflammable?
Richie, that means they catch on fire.
I had no idea.
Help support the Best Darn Diddly Review Show by using our discount code Simpsons at popthreads.com. And do try to stay away from open flames.
Bye, everybody.
Our third act opens at Moe's Tavern, where Homer is consoling with Moe, trying to, well, first of all, kind of shocked that the entire still industry is gay. And aerospace, too. And the railroads. And what else? Broadway.
No.
Crazy.
I always hoped Bart would grow up just like us. What happened?
It ain't no mystery. The whole modern world's got a swishing effect on kids today. And their MTVs and their diet sodas ain't gonna set them straight neither. You gotta do it yourself, Homer. And you gotta do it fast.
What would turn Bart into a man fast? You have to think for me.
Well, let's see now. Time was you sent a boy off to war, shooting a man to fix him right up. But there's not even any wars no more. Thank you very much, Warren Christopher.
Ended all wars. Hey, better yet, Bart could shoot a deer. That's like shooting a beautiful man.
I don't know why that makes me laugh so hard, but a deer is a very beautiful man. Hey, he's right, Homer. After the boys bags a deer, all the diet sodas in the world won't turn them back. And you just sit right back and watch the grandchildren roll in. Oh, they've got a plan. Shoot a deer. All right.
I just love I love the impact of Barney saying, I always thought Bart would turn out like us. And
like us, yeah.
Oh my god, and they just look fucking awful.
I think they made extra care to make sure that Barney looked particularly drunk in that shot. Because, it's obviously a parody of like, oh yeah, I'm, so much better, but he's the idiot at the bar every week. Literally sleeping at the bar every week, but yeah. Homer, Barney, and Moe head off to the mall. They're actually getting hunting supplies.
How? He was down $900 at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, well, when you have emergencies, I guess you can.
No expense for
Yeah.
children of homosexuality.
Yeah. Homer actually sees John and the family, and Homer actually gets in it with Marge a little bit, tells her to stand aside because he's taking the boy deer hunting because he's going to grow up straight for once. I think there's an even extra level of funny to that due to the fact that Bart is now a 32-year-old cartoon character that has been 10 for his entire life, but Homer is complaining about him growing up more than once in this moment.
What? You never went hunting before and you're perfectly straight.
Oh, yeah? How long since you've had a baby?
I love because it's taken his illogic to the point where he's basically calling himself gay.
And Maggie's barely 1 year old. So.
Yeah, good point. Lisa even tries to point out that it's barbaric. I mean, how does killing a deer make you more of a man?
It just does. Name me one gay Indian.
God.
I think he meant Native American.
Yeah, I definitely think that's one that they would probably not say in 2019 versus 1997 for what it's worth.
That and midget, actually. It was interesting to see this ahead of its time episode still had its behind the time moments as well.
Definitely not the podcast to discuss it, but I did hear that midget is now actually the correct one again, but I'm not really sure.
Is it?
Wow. Again, I don't know, but I heard that there was backflash.
Learn about that after the podcast.
Yeah, let me know what you come up with, but I overheard that at passing, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm being trolled right now or not, but either way, John even points out just, something's gonna die.
But Budinsky, what would you know about hunting?
I know this much. I wouldn't wear that hideous hat. Here, take this one. It was worn by Yale Summers and Daktari.
Hang on to it, toy boy. You might need it when it starts raining naked ladies.
That's Homer's logic. He's going to shoot a deer and naked women will fall from the sky.
What I like is that he says, what would you know about hunting? But we find out in a later scene that John actually knows a little bit about the terrain and would have actually been a real good person to have along for this hunting trip.
He's very knowledgeable. It seems like he would have been useful in most situations. So it's Barney, Bart, Moe, and Homer driving off with the guns in tow, ready to go hunting. They're kind of giving him a little bit of a pep talk. I love at one point Moe actually asks Bart if he's ever been hunting before. And Bart's like, nah, something about a bunch of guys alone together in the woods. Seems kind of gay.
And then awkward silence.
Homer immediately, though, again, the irony and the fun of this line, Homer comes back. That is a very immature attitude, young man. Moe points out that the truck only holds 6 carcasses, so don't bother shooting unless they're trophy bucks. If only that was going to be their problem, because we see that there's a time lapse again where all we know is they're drinking beer and not seeing any deer. Bart's getting progressively bored and tired, and by the time it's too late, essentially, Moe actually has to point out to Homer that Bart's already asleep. They're probably not going to get anything today.
And I like that Barney's saying, we should have just stayed at the bar and shot some rats.
Hey, those aren't your rats. I don't know why, I just think it's really cool animation, and I like it when they do shots like that, but Homer actually carries Bart out of the woods. Because he's 10, and he fell asleep.
Yeah.
Sweet. I don't know. I like those sweet moments between Homer and Bart sometimes. It's nice juxtaposition to the choking.
For sure. I also like going in this direction much more than the planned, what was it, a human wheelbarrow race in the steel mill? Because I like that they have this plan to sort of, make Bart hetero, and they sort of kind of get trapped, physically, they're kind of surrounded by their own bad idea, which hammers the point home a little bit more.
basically, from Homer's perspective, it's rock bottom at this point, which is crazy. But Mo is actually trying to like console him a little bit, pointing out like, "Hey, you still got Lisa. It's not so bad. Maybe we can take her hunting tomorrow and make her into a man."
She'd never go. She's a vegetarian.
Oh, jeez, Homer, jeez. You and Marge ain't cousins, are you? Jesus.
No.
That's when they spot a sign for Santa's village, and Mo gets an idea. They're going to find some deer tonight. They actually break into the reindeer pen at Santa's village, which is closed for the season. And that's when we cut back to the Simpsons home, where Lisa and John are talking about where they might be. And they're kind of upset, but John points out, like, there's nothing to be worried about. All the deer migrated north when the state park converted to AstroTurf.
that might be my favorite line in that. The state park, the whole thing.
John actually realizes the only thing that's even close to a deer, and it turns out he knows that they are heading to shoot reindeer. Which is impressive that he knows the area and he's intuitive enough to realize what their next move would be.
Yeah.
Homer actually wakes Bart up already standing in the reindeer pen, which it's honestly, I actually even remember like thinking back when I was a kid, this moment was very, I don't know, it's hard to watch in some ways because you feel...
Kind of dark.
Yeah, it's very dark. And like the idea of having to like shoot an animal in a cage, like, honestly, I'm not even, like, anti-hunting for what it's worth. Like, if you're being responsible about it, like, I think that's a fine hobby to some extent. But it's not something I'm into. It's just it's something I don't know about. But I definitely think it's a whole different ball game if you, like, literally, like, pin up an animal and just shoot it. That seems cruel and unusual. But
well,
Homer
it's his shot, Miles.
Yeah, Homer points out that they found him some deer and it's his shot, but even Bart immediately realizes, like, those aren't deer, those are reindeer, man. I'm not going to shoot those.
And then Mo starts nudging Homer, like, huh?
Homer, honestly, is probably at his worst here, where he actually kind of gets mad at him a little bit and is like, you're going to shoot those deer, I'm going to turn my back, and when I turn around, I want to see a whole pile of dead reindeer.
He also says, be a sport and kill Blitzen.
John Waters actually on the commentary felt like they should have said, go ahead and be a sport and kill Prancer in that line. That was his addition.
Wow.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's that edginess, like you pointed out when we were talking about him a little bit earlier. You mentioned more about like the movies he make would kind of that seems like the like really poking your finger at it type of move that he would make.
Yeah.
Which I also like.
I heard there was only 2 things he wanted changed about the script. I haven't heard the commentary, but I heard he didn't want to use... He suggested the word queer instead of the word fag. And I also heard that there was a line that John said about, like, not getting along with his dad that he wanted to cut because he had, like, just... like repaired his relationship with his dad.
So I was a little bit too, he didn't want to poke at that freshly
open old wound.
Yeah, he didn't want
freshly
like
healed
the
wounds.
cartoon version of him to say something to make that worse, I guess.
That
which
makes
is
sense.
Totally fair. But yeah, like I think John Waters is not very precious about saying the right things to gay people. Like I think you can like he definitely has a sense of humor about it.
Yeah. And again, on the commentary, they didn't really provide a ton of insight for like the behind the scenes of the episode or anything. But again, I just can't praise enough. Not only did the creators of the show talk about how much they enjoyed John Waters, but John Waters just talked about how much fun it was to be on The Simpsons. Everybody there, like we've talked a lot with commentary tracks that feature guests, that it seems like they just have a really fun operation going there. The voice actors all get along. They always make the guest actors feel right at home, make them feel comfortable. And John Waters just went on and on about his experience being a part of this episode and how glad he was able to do so.
Yeah.
For now, though, we're looking at Bart's decision. Basically, we're in the moment with him as he's pointing this gun at a reindeer in a pen that he doesn't want to shoot, being pressured by his father. And that's when none other than Toy Giving Man comes to the rescue.
Wait, we haven't gotten to that point yet. It's the camera angle where it's behind Homer and you hear what you think is a shot.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right. I did miss that part. There is what you think is a shot, but it turns out it's not.
It's reindeer that I would assume would all be men since they have antlers, since they're reindeer, hitting each other during mating season.
They start fighting and actually swarming
According
Homer
to Mo.
and Bart. Yeah, they get very, very protective all of a sudden. And that's actually when Annual Gift Man comes to the rescue, and we can see that John, in a very clever move, assumed that the reindeer would fear their oppressor, so he released it in the cage and caused them to back away, but not before Homer, in a gesture of love, to be fair, took quite the walloping from the reindeer while he was holding his son up above his head, meaning that he wasn't even able to protect his ribs, I'll point out. He was just getting rammed over and over and over again by a bunch of very aggressive reindeer.
He's been tenderized.
I also love to, at one point, Bart actually asks him afterwards, Dad, are you hurt? Just my bones and organs. Nothing important. Homer actually, in his beat-up state, when he sees Santa, thinks it's a miracle, but John points out, no, Homer, Ultra Suede is a miracle. This is just good timing. The family is reunited, and it seems that all is well. Barney and Mo, I forgot to mention, actually ducked and covered under like a trough whenever the reindeer are fighting. And you actually hear Barney yell out, "Is it okay for me to come out now, Mr. Gay Man? Sir?"
I'll do anything you say. Anything.
But they're actually really upset, though. They're frustrated, or they don't really. I should say they're not accepting well. They don't really know how to process, as Barney put it. "Aw, Mo, we were saved by a sissy."
Yeah, we'll never live it down. Oh boy, it looks like it's suicide again for me. Like, oh my gosh.
And this is where we get, well, first of all, that line I mentioned that reminds me of my father, but also the line that it's kind of for Homer's limited ability to do so. Homer's turning point where he realizes that maybe, just maybe, he's been thinking about this wrong. Because he points out, hey, we owe this guy, and I don't want you calling him a sissy. This guy's a fruit. And wait, queer, that's right. That's what you like to be called, isn't it?
Well, that or John.
And Lisa even points out, John, this is about as tolerant as Dad gets, so honestly, you should be flattered.
Well, Homer, I won your respect, and all I had to do was save your life. Now, if every gay man could just do the same, you'd be set.
That's all they have to do.
Well, at the rate Homer's going, that'll happen pretty frequently.
We see that the Simpsons family is on the ride back home, and Homer is actually speaking to his son again. Bart, maybe it's the concussion talking, but any way you choose to live your life is just fine with me.
Huh?
Lisa whispers to Bart, he thinks you're gay.
He thinks I'm gay?
Everybody dance now. And we kind of cut into Bart's brain as the song Everybody Dance Now plays over the closing credits, and we kind of have a mystified look on Bart's face as I think he might be, for the first time in the episode, actually considering the idea that he might be. There's a really funny dedicated sign on this that I don't think has a lot of story other than they were just trying to be funny from what I could find, because it was dedicated to the steel workers of America. Keep reaching for that rainbow. And that actually brings us to the end of our third act and to the episode, Homer's Phobia. First of all, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute blast talking to you, and I'm so grateful for you bringing your personal insight to this story. It was a lot of fun talking to you. Is there anything else at all that you would like to talk about this episode or about The Simpsons in general?
I think we covered a lot of it. No, I'm just gonna say it was great. This is a great episode. Keep reaching for that rainbow.
Well, again, thank you so much. It was an absolute blast chatting with you. Richie, real quick, anything from you or that book of yours?
The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family, points out that one of the stores in the mall at the beginning was one-size-fits-all lingerie, which, fun idea there. I wanted to point out that Homer, when he was in the car at the end, all of a sudden, all of his bruises were gone. And he was all bruised up literally seconds before that. So that plays into the unbreakable Homer thing. But going off of what you said at the top of the episode, Miles, honestly, I thought when this episode aired, we were in our later middle school years at this point, I thought that, like, it wasn't as big of a deal at that time. Like, I thought we were already coming off of everybody being anti-gay at this point, but I guess we weren't, because if the Simpsons were doing it, it was so long ago, I guess I don't quite remember, because I remember this episode being hilarious and fun and not a big deal the first time I watched it. And, you know, everybody was going, oh, there's a spark in my hair. Get it for like months after this aired.
I would agree with you from our perspective, but I would imagine there was a lot of people who identified as gay at the time that probably would disagree strongly.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. And I find that you would think we would learn over the last 20 plus years. Yet, Miles, you and I talked about this yesterday. Even, like, we're so much further along the timeline, yet we still have things like Rocko's Modern Life that are having to do similar style of episodic things, where it's like, have we really changed that much? And it's kind of sad when you think about it that way. So,
oh my God, sorry, but since you brought it up, please go watch the Rocko's Modern Life.
That movie filled my trans heart so full, and it's so funny and beautiful. I highly recommend it.
It was so good, and I was shocked that they were just, the way they went about it was just like it was perfect. Like,
yeah, I would have loved to have seen that when I was like 11.
It was very well done. So, like Miles said, please make sure you guys watch that. It talks about some tough subject matter for a very fun show, but they do it in a very beautiful way. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about The Simpsons. I just wanted to point out that, like, how far have we really come? Can we just treat people with respect and be decent human beings? But other than that, this is a great episode. Like, this is one that whenever it would play in syndication, I was always excited when I saw this one was coming on. And I'm going to attribute almost all of that to John Waters for having such a fun character and being so likable in this. And it's always fun to watch this one.
Very cool. I have a few other things to talk about. Like I said, the commentary didn't talk a lot about the making of the episode, but they did talk a little bit about the reception of the episode. And as you might expect, in 1997, this one did come with a bit of controversy. First of all, The Simpsons are famously known for not having to take censor notes in terms of their, like, just content in general, except from, like, the network censors, where there are certain things that they can't do on account that they can't get sued, various things of that nature. But for the most part, most of their episodes come back with very few notes, and if there are anything, it'll be like, change one thing here so that we don't risk getting sued by this company. This episode, not the case. This episode came back with the words across the top of it, just essentially saying, not approved for network air, for broadcast. And then within the inside, almost every reference to the word gay or queer was essentially commented, like, this is not acceptable for network television. This is Fox in 1997, just to put that into a little bit of perspective. When this episode did finally make it to air, it still faced a lot of controversy. It was banned in many countries, which there's a lot of ass-backward countries out there, so that's not that much of a shock. What is shocking is there was actually some communities in the United States that were blocking it, just for the same and backwards reasons that you might expect as well. However, when all of this controversy kind of faded away and the episode actually did get out into being shown everywhere, there was almost no fan backlash at all. It was entirely, for the most part, positive reviews from people who actually watched the show. The organizations that didn't watch the show were very vocal, but the fans themselves, there was just a handful of objectionable fan mail letters, because it was widely received as a very good episode with fun characters and a great guest star. And it turns out that the people behind the Emmys agreed, because this episode won that year for Outstanding Animated Program.
It's kind of a mirror to, and I know this is taking it to a different extreme, people bad-mouthing the later seasons of the series, and it's usually the people that haven't watched any of it.
Agreed. But that's going to do it for this week's Best Darn Diddly Review show. Again, Jamie, cannot thank you enough for joining us today. It was an absolute blast talking to you. Hey, is there anything that you would like to promote, either anything you're involved in or just your social media where people can follow you?
Yeah, you can look me up by my name, Jamie Zeske, Zeske, on all the social medias. I'll be doing lots of fun shows at Dallas Comedy House and Stomping Ground, and that's about it.
Thank you. Thank you. A lot of great insight in this one and behind the scenes stuff. I appreciate it.
Super stoked. Very fun.
Richie, why don't you go ahead and tell them where they can find us?
We are off the grid starting now.
That's a great idea for a podcast. We're an off the grid podcast.
But now, starting immediately after that, you can find us on social media. Miles is at Mr. Most Days Off. I am at the Wiz_Kid23. Our show is at Best Darn Diddly, DIDDLY. Make sure you follow us all over the place, on or off the grid. But not off the grid, that's creepy.
I am going to go ahead and just real quickly, I always at the end of the episode say thank you to each and every one of you who download this episode, and I truly do really mean that. I really appreciate anybody who takes the time to listen to us ramble on about The Simpsons. But this week, I'm going to harness my inner Mr. Rogers, and I just want to say to everybody that's listening to this podcast right now that I love you and respect you just the way you are. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's Best Darn Diddly Review Show. Make sure you come back again next week, where the streak will continue with our guest Dr. Andrew Briseño joining us to review the episode Brother from Another Series.
Please tune in and listen. We'll do anything you say. Anything.
And until next time, be cromulent to each other.